Hi there, I'm Anjali Nowakowski, and I'm a lawyer that works for an international animal protection organization. I have been vegan for about 13 years, and I was vegetarian for a long time before that, since I was fairly young. My switch to veganism came in a really interesting and unexpected way. Now, I went vegetarian as a child because I instinctively understood that the animals on our plates are the exact same as the animals we choose to love as pets. In fact, my parents still tell people stories of me bringing home as many stray animals as I could find on the walk from my bus stop to my house when I was in elementary and middle school. That involved finding a lot of stray rabbits, because I grew up in Florida and there was a lot of stray rabbits in our neighborhood. Lizards when I could catch them, frogs, and basically any other animal that I thought would want to come home and live with me. So I had this intense love of animals as a child, and one day I instinctively sort of realized that the chicken on my plate was an animal. And I asked my mom about this, and she said, yes, it is the animal. We eat the animals though. And I stopped eating meat that day. Now, my mom, I think, thought it would only last for about a week, but that's not what happened at all. I actually stayed vegetarian through my childhood and adolescence, and then in my very early 20s, when I was 21, made the switch to veganism. Now, someone had given me a book for my birthday, a really great book on the vegan diet and how it can change your life. And I had sort of forgotten about this book and not read it for several months while I was in undergrad. And then as I was transitioning from undergrad to law school, I was moving apartments in New York City and came across this book. So I decided now was the time to read it, and I cracked the book open, sort of thinking that I was going to read about everything that I already knew. Because after all, I had been vegetarian for a very long time, so I thought I knew everything I needed to know about how animals are treated and that my diet was fine. Now, of course, what happened, the first thing I started reading about in this book was dairy and how bad it was for us from a physical perspective, but also how horribly the cows are treated and what a significant impact on our environment factory farming makes, where a lot of these dairy cows live their lives, where most of the dairy cows that we utilize in the States live their lives confined and tortured. And I was shocked. I actually had never thought of other animal products at all. Since I had gone vegetarian as a child, and it was based on an instinctual understanding of the fact that no animal should be treated differently just because we've assigned cultural norms to our dogs and cats that we don't assign to cows and pigs and chickens. But I never researched beyond that. So I never read articles on vegetarianism. I didn't have a lot of vegetarian friends. I wasn't in vegetarian groups in high school and college. I sort of thought, since I had my diet in a way that I liked it and I felt good about my lifestyle and I was doing what I could in my way for animals, that was enough. Obviously, this book completely changed my mind on all of that. So I started reading about dairy cows in this book, and then chickens used for eggs. And then I later started using that book as sort of a jumping off point. I started doing a lot more research about animals used for clothing, animals exploited in entertainment, bees and honey, and just all of the different ways that we really take things that don't belong to us, including animals' lives. So at that point, there was absolutely no going back, and I had already decided that I really wanted to try to work full-time in a job that would make a difference to the world. So I never intended to be a corporate lawyer because it just wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to be able to make a difference. So since I already knew that, and since I had already started getting involved in certain groups that were kind of helping me guide myself deeper into veganism and really understanding the impact that we as humans have on the lives of animals, I started kind of expanding my research and my reading and my communications with people beyond just the sort of ethical elements of veganism, which were and still are the absolute most important to me, and then understanding more about our health and the environmental impact of veganism. Now, I had been a long distance runner since I was 16, so reading about dairy and how bad it was for the human system and how much it can do to our GI tract, to our skin, to our overall health, to our cancer risk, was a really significant turning point for me. I read The China Study by Dr. T. Colin Campbell and was just absolutely floored at what that study found. Basically, Dr. T. Colin Campbell says you can turn on and off the gene for cancer by the animal protein in your diet, and one of those animal proteins is casein, which is found in dairy milk. So I started to have this really overwhelming awakening about my veganism and my diet and my lifestyle and whether I was doing enough. So as I was starting to expand my advocacy at this time, I then switched from reading about all the health aspects of it to reading about all of the environmental aspects of animal agriculture, especially in the States, but all over the world. Now, if you've never really taken time to look into this, you might have the view that animals that are raised for meat or dairy or other animal products or exploited in entertainment live in ways that we would all be happy with. So maybe you picture the really happy dairy cows roaming around in a field that we often see on the side of milk cartons or in advertisements for milk products. Or maybe you picture chickens running around happily with their little chicken families and their chicken friends without any cages and living this beautiful life outdoors in the sunshine. Well, the reality of the situation is actually a lot worse. So most animals that we consume are raised in factory farms. Factory farms are basically like these giant warehouses where animals are packed so tightly that they don't have room to do any of the behaviors that are natural to them. In fact, pigs raised for food in the United States can't even turn around. They can't whip their tails, and for that reason their tails it's called tail docking. They're literally cut. And they basically go crazy from the stress of living in these tiny environments. So while I personally don't believe that eating animals is in any way anything that anyone should be doing ethically, the reality is even their lives before they're killed for food are so bad that if most of us as meat eaters had to go spend a day in a factory farm, there's no way that we would be able to do it. The same is true for cows. They're not given the space they need. They are often fed a really high diet of antibiotics because the conditions in these factory farms are so bad, of course, that these animals are getting sick. They're not being given medical care because what does the animal agriculture industry really care about? They care about profit. They care about selling animals and meat and animal products in order to make the most amount of money possible. So the concern for the lives of these animals is nowhere to be found in the factory farming process. Now, after these animals are moved from the farms to slaughter, the situation gets even worse. A lot of the times the slaughter process is so fast, again, because you're trying to turn over the animals here to get the most amount of meat possible. You're not worried about whether the animals are being tortured, whether they're being slaughtered in a way that minimizes their pain or anything like that. So a lot of the times the slaughter line is going so quickly that the animals are still alive when they get dunked into water and electrocuted to remove the fur, or they'll have their throats slit, and they will continue to be alive for several moments after that, literally just because this is not an industry that cares about animals at all. So while the ethical impact and the health impact of veganism is very significant, I then later started to learn about the environmental impact of veganism. Now, as someone who has always believed in the responsibility of each generation to take care of the planet for future generations and also for ourselves living in the now, I was startled to find that the the environmental impact of animal agriculture is so high that it's not possible to be an environmentalist who eats meat. There's no way to believe in protecting the environment if you're still consuming a meat-based diet. The factory farming industry is a large contributor of greenhouse gases, which contributes to global warming. So the factory farming industry emits more CO2 and methane than all of the other top industries combined, contributing to global warming. And the environmental impact in terms of water and land usage of factory farming is so high, again, that there's no way to say you're an environmental advocate if you continue to eat meat. You could take a shower once every week instead of once every day because you believe so much in the conservation of water, and you still would be doing less than eliminating meat from your diet. So after learning of all of the different ways in which our lives are affected by the animal agriculture industry and the ways in which we affect animals' lives very, very poorly, we take their lives, we torture them while they are alive, I decided to kind of gear my entire practice into animal protection. So for a while after law school, I did a lot of pro bono work in the animal protection movement while continuing to work sort of a traditional law job in intellectual property because that was what was working out best for me at the time. And then I realized that there was no way for me to continue to do that because our world is so sick, and the way in which we're treating our animals is so unjust, and they don't have voices. So I wanted to live my life being a voice for them if I could, which is why I currently work full-time in the animal protection movement. So if you don't know anything about veganism, or maybe you haven't spent time looking into adjusting your diet, this Earth Day is really the perfect time. We're all at home in our houses, separated in a lot of circumstances from our family and loved ones, and we're all looking for things to do because we can't go out and do our usual activities. One thing to do might be to pick up a really great book on veganism, like T. Colin Campbell's The China Study, or watch a movie that talks about the way that we treat our animals, like Earthlings. If anything else, maybe just educating yourself a little bit more on how we treat animals and how we live in the world with our animal agriculture systems, especially in the United States, would help give you kind of a broader picture of ways that we can be fixing this problem. We should be moving away from animals on our plates. We should be moving away from exploiting animals for entertainment. We should be moving away from killing animals for our clothing. And removing meat from your diet is going to be the single biggest thing you can do to help the environment going forward. So this day, I hope you stay safe and home with your loved ones, and that you get a little time to read about making the world a better place.